Plus Dutch for cheese.
All right, we're rolling.
I'm here.
Go. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to Beyond Binary Thinking. This is a podcast to expose the false binary tribalism and ego that is killing discourse in politics and current events. We hope to find some more radical, nuanced ideas. So I think let's start with some brief introductions to who we are. Probably all of us fail to fit comfortably on a left-right pigeonhole. So let's describe our politics briefly, sort of some of the labels we're comfortable with. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So, Patrick, if I could define my politics, for the majority, I consider myself a moderate. I don't like too much of something. I don't like too little of it either. I like just enough. But the older I get, the less significant that moderate gets. You used to be able to say you're moderate and people be like, oh, okay, that's great. Okay, so you understand my side. And now it's like, no, you need to understand all of my side or nothing. So I'm in revision mode right now, I can say.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The whole landscape shifting. So every time I pick a label, I find out online that I now have 20% of the people hate me.
Right.
And I'm like, does that mean I should change or just tell those people to fuck off? I'm never quite sure.
Yeah, I think that just means that 20% of the people on the internet hate you at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. If no one hates you, then you're doing something wrong. So, who wants to go next?
I will go. My name is Brenton Lengel. I am a poet, playwright, Ringo Award-nominated comic creator, and I'm the author of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. Ooh. The fourth issue is out, and I'm about to launch a Kickstarter for the first trade, and I'm also the author of Durruti, Shadow of the People, about real-life anarchist hero Buenaventura Durruti, who I also play in a historical D&D game with Chris. If you guys want more information, just check out my website, www.brentonlengel.com, or just Google my name. I'm literally the only one in the world.
Good to know. And your politics? Same as Durruti?
Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to talk about that shit. I'm an anarchist, classical anarchist like in the Kropotkinite tradition. Some people call that an anarcho-communist. And I was very active with Occupy Wall Street, used to have my own radio show, Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, and now I have that on my YouTube because, schedules are hard.
All right. Yeah, my name is Paul. I identify generally as a leftist, although, it's kind of a shifting baseline on what that even means in America anymore. But I usually relate to people, just for simplicity, like Bernie Sanders circa 2016 is kind of generally where I fall. I also consider myself an anarcho-sympathizer. I'm not an anarchist, but if I were to pick an ideology, probably would like that the best, just because generally hierarchy drives me completely insane. So my biggest problem with leftism is that I just don't want to read all the theory, so it leads to me not having as much identification as a lot of folks do.
There's a lot of homework.
There's so much homework. It's hard. It's hard out there. Too many books.
You haven't read like 8 volumes of Deleuze and compared them with Marx. I can't even have a conversation with you.
I know. I should probably shut this off at this point. So
it's funny. It's funny actually. There was like a leaked memo from it was like the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security, and they were having trouble infiltrating anarchist circles because, and it's like in so many words, they're basically like, these people are too smart and too well read. We can't pretend to be them.
It's true. It's true. But anarchists are also really nice, so that's something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also famous stories of like cops or the FBI going really badly undercover and being like, hey, let's buy some drugs and smash some windows. And everyone's like, check out the fucking cops there. Like, whatever.
I think there was a thing in Texas. They were trying to they were trying to infiltrate like some sort of like anarcho, like it was like a anarcho pacifist vegan like group, and these huge built guys were suddenly coming up being like, yeah, I'm totally behind that, guys. Revolution.
Like, fucking really.
Yeah, sadly, it worked a little bit better for them in the UK, where they ended up like marrying and having kids. Oh, they were so deep undercover.
Yeah,
it was, quite upsetting. I used to identify as centrist, and then I don't know. The last few years have been rough for me. But yeah, the whole point of this podcast is that I don't agree with everything the left says, and I have problems, and I find they're very easily triggered, and it's very easy to say the wrong thing to the wrong person. And I'm quite comfortable talking with all ideas. I want to have the debate. I like the open marketplace of ideas. And yeah, I think it's just upsetting to me that if you tell me how you feel about one issue too often, right, I can guess how you feel on 7 other issues, because you tend to read one sort of newspaper and get your news from one sort of TV show, and it shouldn't be that easy to pigeonhole people, right? People are complex.
Should not be.
How you feel on foreign policy shouldn't dictate how you feel on a range of other things that seem completely unrelated. So yeah, I don't know. It's complicated. That's the simplest way I can say it.
I hear you saying the marketplace of ideas, and already I disagree with you. But no, to kind of play on your point, I don't think ideas are a marketplace, or at least I don't think that that's a good way to think about it, because that assumes that, like, within ideas there are winners and losers. Whereas if you think more dialectically about this,
it's like a library, right? Like, you can pick some books.
Well, I mean, I would call it like an ecosystem. So, like, there different ideologies and ideas need to exist in conflict with each other, because we don't know who the good people are if there aren't bad people. We don't know what is healthy if there's not a lack of health. We can't even define life without death. You need the opposite, the opposing force. So if we look at, like, I guess the march of humanity and the march of human thinking, I really think that certain political things would not have existed. An example I always use is if Malcolm X had not existed and had not made the radical argument, Martin Luther King would have been treated as though he were Malcolm X. So
true.
Exactly.
Yin and yang. Yeah. Even though I'll add to that, by 1968, they're treating Martin Luther King like Malcolm X. I think Time Magazine came out with a poll, and I think he had like less than 20% approval rating. And remember, that was the time that he's talking about the Vietnam War. He's talking about economic injustice. As long as he was talking about civil rights, then that was fine. But when we start talking about the Vietnam War, and at that time, the occupation was becoming very unpopular. Then you become a radical.
He was taking shots at entrenched power. In a big way, and the powerful they control all the news and the information that we get to see for the most part. So they're going to be mad about that. Yeah,
they're
going to be upset. That's right. That was the conundrum.
So
right.
Before we get too deep, I'd like a quick thought experiment go around. So without mentioning Donald Trump, has Biden done anything good since he's been in office? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, gentlemen.
So I was looking down, like, when you mentioned this before the podcast, and I was just like, I was looking down a list on PolitiFact of all of the stuff that Biden, like his election promises, like that big agenda he rolled out on election day, and like how many of these have been kept, how many have been broken. So far, mathematically, out of all of the promises that he made, he has only kept 13%. At this point, and the vast majority, 45%, are stalled. So,
well, I mean, that so often happens with the American process, right?
Right.
Every president struggles with this, unless they own all 3 houses, which I thought Biden did. And so
he do, but he has Joe Manchin, who's a Democrat, who they didn't see him coming. I think that he's a thorn. I'm not going to say he's a thorn.
How is one guy a thorn? The best way I heard this takedown was like Joe Manchin is like when the dad says to the kids, go ask your mum, knowing that the mum will say no. And it's like the Democrats being like, we would love to help you, but that naughty boy Joe Manchin, hands tied.
It's not just him, it's also
Christine
Sinema.
Sinema.
Yeah, she's
one.
What I love about her was she came in looking like she was going to be like, kind of like on AOC's wavelength. She had sort of an activist past, and she just sort of did this like manic pixie dream girl change where she's just like, I'm going to start siding with big business just because, and who knows what I'm going to do.
Funny how that happens, right?
She started taking a lot of money. But I mean, even if
after an expensive, successful election, suddenly people's priorities change. With that.
But maybe I'm kind of cynical about it. But even if it wasn't for Manchin, even if they had a larger majority, I still don't think any of this would get done. Because like back during the Obama administration, they had a super majority for I think 2 months, and then after that they had, it was a bit. That they had actually 60.
2 years.
But because I know there was like an illness or something that took them down to like 59. But even then they couldn't get anything done. And they still couldn't get Obamacare passed in any way that seemed to make sense. And it turned into this like giant amoeba of a package that ended up getting passed through. So I'm like, I don't know if the Democrats actually want to do anything at this point.
But despite the statistic of 13% and the usual gridlock that American politics, the filibuster, and if the wind blows the wrong direction, it seems that the plans fall through in America. Can anyone think of something Biden's done? I do have something.
I was going to say, I do have one quick one. The thing that stands out to me is the war in Afghanistan and actually pulling us out of Afghanistan. Even though, some folks may disagree on exactly how it was done, my opinion is if we've been there for 20 years and it falls in like a week, clearly we shouldn't have been there in the first place.
It always would have felt badly.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, actually, most of the Afghan army were just on paper, a bunch of generals collecting money.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, I've got 10,000
they were getting
soldiers
paid
behind me. So it was always going to
They cut the money off.
Yeah, there was, the idea that you could have pulled out is a myth because there were no soldiers.
And that was the thing Trump was trying to make without mentioning him. That was supposed to be one of his hallmark things. He didn't do it. And if you go and check out Ann Coulter, she's one of the conservatives that just beats Trump down, at first being an advocate for him. That was one of the things she was saying. He lost me when he didn't do that, and then all of a sudden Biden does it. And even though it was messy, but it wasn't. There was not going to be a pretty way to withdraw to begin with.
Yeah, and that's what I would say in a non-partisan way. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was kind of a 1-2 punch from Trump and
very
Biden,
much.
right? He laid the groundwork, and Biden
pulled the plug.
Now,
I think the only thing so far I've seen, and it's not policy-wise, his speech on January 6th was probably the most direct in terms of laying out, and this was a speech specifically for Donald Trump that says, "Hey, dude, you lost. You're a loser. You're an existential threat." And I think that was something that I walked away from saying, I kind of wish it was a little bit earlier for him to kind of lay that out. But January 6th being the anniversary was a great time to say, we need to move past this particular thing in terms of this whole idea that this election is illegitimate. And so I can say policy-wise, I haven't seen anything yet because, remember, I'm moderate leaning right. So a lot of those, different policies that come out, I'm just not really with. But outside of that, and the fact that he is governing in a traditional way with respect for the office again, with respect for norms, I can give him that and say, okay, I feel comfortable, even though I don't agree with a lot of his policies, that he understands that he is supposed to work within the confines of the Constitution that limits him. And it's good to have that again because we saw someone who for 4 years had absolutely no respect for it.
Yeah, and I mean, American elections, from an outsider's perspective, seem to go on at a really long time. It seems to be half of their presidency is running for the next time. So the idea that after the election it still has to run on for another 3 years of debating the results seems madness.
Very much.
I've been following recently. He's a sci-fi author, very smart gentleman called Cory Doctorow. Is anyone familiar with him?
I should be, but I'm not.
I'd really recommend him. Can't recommend him enough. And got a brilliant podcast. One of the things he pointed out that Biden's actually effectively done is put people in place, especially in tech. I don't know about the other industries. We can get into that. But, the classic thing of... in not just American politics, all politics, the person you put as head of energy works with the oil companies, and his son works with the oil companies, and when he leaves the office, he's going to go work on a board of an oil company, right?
Who was that? Hang on, there was a guy that
all of them.
Trump.
It's not one guy. It's all of them.
Yeah, no. But there was a guy from Texas,
Rick Perry,
that Trump put into the position. Yeah, who said when he got Secretary of Energy, he was like, I thought that meant I was a salesman for American oil.
He was over nukes. I remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't know he was over that. Jesus Christ.
Sure, the Democrats are as guilty of that, especially in healthcare. We'll get into that.
Mayor Pete, as of Department of Transportation, like what expertise does he have running transportation?
Right.
None.
But yeah, he backed Biden in shooting down Bernie at the right time, so he was owed a position, right? That was the horse trade.
I think he was the first to bail. Yeah.
But before we get pulled off track, let me.
So hang on, I wanted to get.
But let me bring my point.
Bring your point home. Okay.
One of the things Biden's done, apparently, the people he's put in charge of regulating tech, and we have an issue now with Facebook and Google where they are just uncontrollable monopolies. The amount of advertising revenue that goes through their system, and they've just destroyed our media, right? Like there's so few journalists these days and so little money because they've just hoovered it all up, and then every time they're just like, oh no, we're just in it for the likes and we're your friendly social network. So apparently the people that have been put in place to break apart those monopolies and start regulating that industry are the people you'd want. And so he was saying really enthusiastically how there's some really smart people there that are going to do the job that should have been done 10 years ago, finally.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is a change in policy, obviously, but he's resumed ties with the Palestinian Authority, and I think that's really, really important because, I mean, you've got the people in Gaza essentially living in an open-air prison, and it's going to sound worse than it actually is, but it's still monstrous. I do believe that the IDF is, engaged in active genocide by the UN's definition of it. So, they're trying to remove, for instance, all Palestinians from Gaza, all Palestinians from the West Bank. That is...
If you're waiting for anyone to disagree with you, that this isn't a controversial opinion in most of the world.
Yeah. So
Can't be
that's
in America,
the first...
but...
Yeah, very much in America, unfortunately. But so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that he reversed the family separation policy. And that, I think, is probably one of the single most important acts that you can do, because you really got to think not just about the how evil that is to steal children from their parents, to try to scare people into not coming to the United States. Think about the impact on each and every one of those children and each and every one of those families, and how that is going to interact them and every single person they deal with down the line. I mean, this is where an understanding of karma comes into play, because as any action that we take within reality isn't just that action. It has ripple effects. It has it has consequences, and often we think we can insulate ourselves from the consequences. But the United States, I really believe this, we are going to be dealing with negative consequences and negative outcomes from this policy of family separation for the next 100 years at least. So it was really important that we ended that and we did not continue to break up immigrant families when they were on their way here.
All right, let's kick off with immigration then. So one thing I've heard on that point is that, the camps were disastrous, but that's always been a problem, always been a crisis, always been a tragedy. I think often the criticism levied at the Republicans and Trump, and sure, the family separation was awful because you saw this weird situation of, I don't know if you've seen the videos of 4-year-old kids in court cases trying to speak to a judge, and you're like, oh, this shit should not be happening. But I'm a member of a group called Close the Camps, and they're campaigning as hard now as they were then, saying these camps have often just been moved, so now they're back in Mexico or whatever, and the problem hasn't been fixed. It's just been sort of kicked down the road a little bit, right? So I'd be interested to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is really important to understand. Again, it's this kind of brings up the, when I said genocide, when I said Israel is engaged in active genocide against the Palestinians under the UN definition.
Less controversially, you could just say apartheid. And I think it's very hard to argue that
it's not apartheid.
Not an apartheid.
Yeah, exactly. So but the reason I brought that up is when we say, for instance, that the United States under Trump was building concentration camps, that is literally true. That is actively the truth. But what's interesting is people in their minds, because of, the Third Reich, when you say concentration camp, they automatically think death camp. And so we can't actually object.
Think that's a mistake on their part.
Yeah.
The charge language was intentionally being used to make that comparison, no?
Yeah, absolutely. But what I'm saying is that when we have these equations of you equate the removal of an ethnic group from an area with the extermination of an ethnic group from an area, or you equate the an actual concentration camp with a death camp, it has the unintended effect of making it more difficult to object to when the lesser but still monstrous evil is happening. So, I think what people need to realize...
The best way I heard it, by the way, was Anne Frank, right? Was not killed in an extermination camp. She was in a prison camp, right? And she died of a disease there because the conditions weren't good.
Yeah, quote-unquote natural causes.
Yeah. But obviously no one likes to feel the butt of that comparison, so I see how people react strongly. But I do think that the Democrats want to make better conditions in their camps, but they're still camps, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you compare it to Japanese internment, people, I think the concentration camp was actually invented either by the British or the Spanish. I think it was the British. So it's your fault, Chris. It was utilized by the Spanish and the Americans, and then,
technically, we learned it from the Africans in Africa. So.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So, I would say that, this level of inhumanity, if you look into the history of it, I would really recommend there's a wonderful podcast, Behind the Bastards with Robert Evans, and he has a 2-parter episode where he goes into the history of concentration camps once the reality of the family separation in particular was hitting. If a bunch of people are coming to an area, obviously, if there's not housing for them, there's going to be some kind of camp. But the idea of using that, living in that environment or being confined in them as a cudgel to frighten away people, usually in the United States, who've been fleeing wars in Latin America that are a direct result of U.S. foreign policy, I think is just absolutely unconscionable.
Yeah, but I would also say this though. At the end of the day, this is a result of this is a result of not having an immigration policy that includes some form of path to citizenship for the individuals that are here, and some form of enhanced security, and a model through which individuals who come here, no matter what their reason is, are illegal. And I think that any attempts to frame it as, especially when Trump came along, as a wall or whatever the case may be, was framed as nativism or racist. And I think that the hallmark or the origin of this is that both parties have not done a great job of having an immigration policy that deals with the issue. Every time they try to do it, the Gang of Eight, they get there, it's bipartisan, it stops. And so we still have an immigration policy, still have an immigration problem, and we're going to continue to have one until both parties on some kind of aspect, which I don't see anything like that happening because we got other things we got to deal with now, doing something about it. And I think that anyone who comes up and says, we need to secure the border, we need to send people back that come illegal, oh, he's a racist. That's not true. That is absolutely not true. What we're saying is, or what anybody's saying is that we have to have a system in place, an immigration policy in place, and it has to be a clear policy. And we have laws on the books. So nothing that when individuals are deported who come to this country legally, I don't think that's immoral for the U.S. to enforce the laws that are on the books.
Yeah.
And I think that That's an issue that we have one group way over here, and we have one group way over here, and there are people like me who are sitting right here saying, I get what you're saying, but you're a little too far out there. I got what you're saying, but you're a little too far out there too. Why don't both of you come over a little bit? That won't happen.
Fixed, yeah.
And it won't get fixed. It won't get fixed.
So
because, yeah.
So I would say, so I'm going to disagree with you pretty hard on that, though. I would say what it sounds like what you seem to be advocating for is probably a step forward compared to what we have now. But I'm going to point out two things. One, if we're talking about morality, I do think that it is the law is not morality, and the only reason these laws are on the books is the state, which is the military and the police, conquered a territory and enforces those laws by violence and the threat of violence. As such, I don't think you can make a moral equivalence between laws. Laws may be good and moral, but they are not a moral thing in and of themselves, and it is often immoral to enforce the law. And I might even go as far as to say enforcing any law in using state violence is inherently immoral. The second thing that I'll mention is I don't think you can make an ethical case to halt the free movement of peaceful people. And, you know, like if there's an army coming to take over and conquer, okay. But if these are people who are coming here to another point on the earth to work or for any reason to work, to travel, I don't think that these borders are real things, you know. They are created by human institutions and, again, by violence and the threat of violence. So
can I butt in there and side with Pat, which might surprise you, but... It's not just. I get that anarchist perspective. I've heard that argument. Borders are violence, right?
Yeah.
But part of the reason the border is guarded is because in a democracy, a hell of a lot of people have voted on that specific issue, right? A lot of people in the southern states see the problems of this just unfettered immigration. We have a very similar argument in Europe, and they vote for it. And I think that is. Part of the authority, and the left often misses here, is that obviously horrible things happen in the name of border security, and there's people dying in camps, and that needs to be addressed. But if a majority of people don't want an open border policy, I think it's kind of on the left to make that argument and sway public opinion rather than just be like, but I don't believe in borders. I think borders are mythical, magical nonsense. And you're like, fine, right. But a lot of people disagree with you.
Let's hang on.
But especially when Mexico has border security, we can't move en masse there.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that to say that, you know, when individuals come here, and again, I believe that there should be a path to citizenship for over 10 million people who are here. But when we're talking about a mass exodus from one country to another, then now we're talking about resources. We're talking about all types of different things. And if we're saying that people should be able to peacefully move because they're fleeing their country and seeking asylum in some aspect, I think that we need to have a deeper conversation about really what does that mean, and what does that mean for the individuals who did it the right way? Because there are millions of people from it. And I live in Texas, and I know a lot of individuals who've come here the right way, and they're citizens, or they came here, they did what they had to do, and they are not for it. Mm-hmm. So I think that the conversation just has to develop a bit on peaceful movement and what does that mean for the individuals who are native to the country in terms of citizenship.
So we were talking about the morality of the acts rather than, because I was responding specifically to your claim that it is moral to enforce the law. I don't think it's necessarily moral to enforce the law, and it could be immoral. Similarly, if we're talking about democracy, like real democracy, when people whose voices are actually implemented by government policy, which is not the case in the United States. We are not a democracy. We are an oligarchy. What
I disagree. We're a republic, but I disagree.
Well, no, we are a republic. That's like the structure. But in terms of is the voice of the people actually reflected in public policy? Mathematically, it is not. Instead, it's the voices of the elite. But let's say we were a democracy, and let's say a majority, overwhelming majority, 90% votes for segregation within the United States, or to reinstate slavery, for instance, that would still be immoral, even if, the majority decided upon it. Like, might does not make right, even if might makes reality. So,
can I just talk about the problem with those 2 points you just said? That first, we live in an oligarchy that subverts the will of the people, and secondly, that oligarchy should ignore the will of the people because it's more moral.
No, it could be more. No. The oligarchy is. Yeah. The point is not that we should have elites making decisions or the people making decisions. The point is simply what is moral and what is not. Now, if we're talking about like specific policy, with regard to borders and movement between borders, the thing that I always point out is, it's not like all the people in Kentucky will suddenly get together and invade Tennessee because there is an open border between Kentucky and Tennessee. And similarly, I don't see an inherent problem with doing the exact same thing with Mexico or any other country or every country on the earth. And in fact, economists have predicted that a world with free movement and open borders would be something like $76 billion richer, specifically because, with the system of capitalism that we have right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Across the world, that's not a lot of money. Like America spends on Kleenex per month.
Yeah. I mean, we have a $21 trillion GDP.
Yeah, I may have quoted the number wrong. It might actually be trillion or whatever. And I tend to reverse things when I remember them. So
it's fine.
But the point is,
because I find this debate often gets really philosophical.
Yeah.
Right? The point Pat was making was we need reform of the system and the rules now.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
The ideal state, right? So I don't think there's a...
Yeah, well...
I agree with that, but what I'm saying is that, where I took issue was, one, on the claim about the morality, and, I've made that claim 2 or 3 times, and then 2, I suggested that I think we may need a more extreme policy than what is being suggested. If it's a vote between what we have now and what was suggested, then absolutely fine. Well, I think he's got a better plan than we otherwise would, but I don't think that that's going to ultimately solve the problems in the long run, and what we need in the long run is open borders.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I think my frustration with it too, and I was listening to Adolph Reed recently, and he was talking about how politics is not about trying to get into heaven, right? It's about trying to make things less shitty, and no one seems to be willing to attempt to make our border and our immigration policy less bad. I think Biden rolled it, Trump decided to make it worse, and then Biden kind of rolled it back to the norm. But the camps that were holding those children that are being separated from their families, they're still there. They still have kids in them. They're just not kids who are forcibly separated. They were kids who came over separate from their parents. So we still have children in these same types of camps, but everyone seems to be a lot more quiet about that now. Because when Trump was doing it, it was this terrible fascist thing. But then when Biden does it, it's like, well, what is he supposed to do with these kids? We got to hold them in these camps.
Well,
they have to be in these cages. And
that's the problem.
Yeah, and it's like...
Absolutely. If you look at Obama deported more immigrants than all the other presidents combined prior to him.
Yep.
Nobody never talks about that.
I'm just anti-kids being in a cage regardless of who does it. I don't like that.
I am too. Exactly. I don't like it either.
No, it's not good. So why...
I don't like to see homeless on the street, but that doesn't mean that I think that every homeless person should get a free house either.
Whoa, hang on for a second. Because right now in the United States, we have enough empty houses for each homeless person in the country to have 7 to themselves. So if we've got the empty houses and we've got the homeless people, obviously you just let them live in the empty houses. But
you can't make better people by giving them housing. That's not how it works.
I don't care about making them better people. I care about...
you're going to have to, because if you don't, they're going to still be homeless. That's the point. We have to rehabilitate people.
They're going to be homeless if they have a home?
How are they going to take care of the home?
I'm confused.
So we're going to give them free electricity? We're going to give them free electricity and utilities and everything as well? Who's going to pay the property taxes on the home?
Well, Patrick, here's the problem. So first off, you think money is real. Money is not real. It comes from nowhere.
It's real.
No, it is
real.
Absolutely not real.
It's absolutely real. It's real.
Okay.
Give me all of your money if it's not real.
No,
just hang
on. Your money is a measure. It is an intelligence system we use to dictate,
measure goods and services.
Yeah, exactly. It's not real, particularly not fiat currency, which is backed by absolutely nothing but the guarantee of the United States government that it is real. It's not. So we need it. It's important. It is a very useful intelligence system. But what happens is that people wind up thinking that money is real, and they say, where's the money going to come from? The money never came from anywhere. It is all in people's heads. So,
we've had a barter system, whether it was currency or
barter
trading
system
cows.
has never existed in the entire history of humanity.
We've traded resources.
Trade has existed, but barter system never has.
We've always traded resources.
Well, yeah, we can trade resources.
We've always traded resources. We can call it whatever we want.
Just a little bit. Before we get into our set talking points, I think we had a really good set thing to discuss. With some nuance and bridges to cross. And once we get into the money isn't real shouting argument, I've had it before.
Whoa, hang on. I'm not shouting here. I think that I'm speaking in a very forceful yet bemused...
Oh, no. I take no offense to that. I enjoy this. I want you to know that. It's not personal with me. These are issues for me.
Yeah, and I think part of what I said that triggered this, but I feel like there is a middle ground between there's a child sleeping on the floor in a cage and... everyone gets to come in, or like, I think that there is a better solution that we can work towards, like you were saying, Patrick. It's just no one's willing to do that, or it's either they're not willing to do it, like make it less bad, which is really kind of my desire, or our system of politics is so completely broken in this country that no one can actually get it done. Which, as time goes on, I'm starting to think it's the latter. I think that things are actually becoming so broken that even people go in wanting to do things, it's just impossible with the current structures that we have.
Yeah.
That's right.
A good example here, it would actually be Vietnam's initial response to COVID, the original wild-type COVID. In the United States, we have now lost over 800,000, I think 822 was the death toll to COVID. That includes the Delta variant, but even before that, we were above 500,000 dead, 500,000. In Vietnam, they were able to effectively defeat COVID in its first form to where there were only 35 deaths in the entire country. And not only that, but they managed to grow their economy all 4 quarters. So in the United States, it was like, what do? Do we save lives or do we save the money? They wound up saving neither because the lockdowns were half-assed, in my opinion. But then in Vietnam, they were able to do both because they had a political and economic system that was not reliant on profit being the main driving force. So
the state of Texas economy is bigger than the whole country of Vietnam.
It definitely is not, because Vietnam has...
It is, sir.
Vietnam, so first off, the economy is not exactly what I'm talking about here, but population-wise, Vietnam has 1/3 the population of the United States. And it definitely was not small population, because other countries that have smaller populations than Vietnam have not done as well as Vietnam did. Again,
in terms of what, economics?
In terms of both economics and saving lives.
What is the chief exporter of Vietnam?
The chief export of Vietnam?
What do they export?
I mean,
so recently I looked into this, and Vietnam exports a lot of oil, which explained why America was there.
That's a weird question. That's a weird question.
Yeah, but my point here is that if you can decouple, you're talking about the system being broken, and I don't think the system is broken. I think the system was designed and it's terrible. I think it was designed specifically to be terrible. And like the reason why is it was built by a bunch of old, dead, rich white guys who understood the world in a very specific way. The American founding fathers were essentially aristocracy. So they're going to build a system that is good for aristocrats. They're not evil. It's just that's the way they see the world. It's myopic. So I think what we need a system that can act contrary to profit when it is important to do that we can lock down meaningfully with COVID without causing the economy to crash. Because it can be done. It just can't be done in a capitalist economy.
Do you have an example of when it was done?
I just gave you an example of Vietnam.
So,
I don't think Vietnam is an example.
I mean, dude, look at...
I haven't heard anything about it. I think I think South Korea was a country that did very well with COVID,
but not as well
in
as
terms
Vietnam.
of their.
And Vietnam is a much larger country than South Korea.
Also, if we were curious.
So let me ask you this: what did Vietnam do that was so great?
They were, as I said, they were able to lock down. They were able to lock down meaningfully. They were able to distribute food and resources in such a way to people that were locked down that they did not spread the disease. And they managed, again, to contain COVID, keep it outside of their borders for the entire time of wild type.
And how did they keep it out of their borders? They stopped people from coming, right?
I mean, yes, that's part of it. But again...
Oh, I like that.
Hang on.
I like that. I like that.
There is... Yeah, and there could be reasons
why
someone would not...
Even though it's immoral, even though it's not moral.
No,
hang on. I like that.
I said there is no
that
moral
we can keep people out.
There is no moral case that can be made for stopping the free movement of peaceful people. There is a moral case that can be made for stopping the free movement...
when everybody's sick.
Yeah. Exactly.
When
it makes sense.
So when we have let's go back to immigration here. When we have drugs and different things that come across the border, because everybody's not coming across the border, that's great. We know that already, right? There are some bad people that come across the border. Yeah. Is that an opportunity to do something about it, you say?
I mean, what I would say is, with regard to bad people and drugs coming across the border, I would be in favor of all drug legalization, but let's put that aside. And let's say that we agree.
Me too.
That,
we agree on something. I think all drugs should be legal.
Great. So let's put that aside. So let's say it is actually evil and these drug dealers are evil and bad. I think it's actually a bad idea to attack people for crossing the border illegally, because you're going to be wasting time, and instead law enforcement needs to go after the people who actually do bad things. If you're chasing after...
They do.
Well, no, not to the extent that they need to. Because again, if you're chasing after people who are committing no additional crimes other than crossing into the United States, then what's happening is that you are devoting resources, energy, and focus that could otherwise be spent stopping actual crimes by native populations and actual crimes by immigrants. So you just treat the crime...
Are you saying we need to fund the police more?
No, I think...
Because it takes money to do that.
Yeah, I would... Well, yes, but again...
Reallocation of resources, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even Alan Greenspan admitted this talking to Rand Paul on the floor of the Senate. We have the ability, with a modern economy, to fund literally anything we can think of, as long as there are two things in place. One, the political will to do it. And two, that if we are, for instance, printing money, it must be printed within proportion to a growing economy. So overall, it's not that we can't do these things. It's, is there the political will to do them? Is there the political will to have universal health care? Is there the political will to have an open society? I think right now there is not. And I think we should work on doing that. Can I jump in there then? Yeah.
And come from a European social democrat perspective, right? And it touches on a bunch of points we've had about homelessness and all these things. So I am a capitalist. That puts me in strange conversations with my left friends. But for me, I think often that capitalism provides good solutions to some of these problems.
I don't necessarily disagree.
Even homelessness, for example. My point is that certain goods and services aren't optional, right? Like, you don't choose whether you want to eat. You should just save some money and not eat food. Like, you know, certain things you need to survive. They're basic minimum. Healthcare is one of them, right? And the American healthcare debate for me looks as ridiculous as if we were talking about some third world country debating privatizing their fire service. It's just bonkers, right? Certain things makes more sense to do at scale without a profit in the middle. Some things can have little profit incentives, and we have that in Europe. You're right. You'll always have the rich people who pay for their own stuff, and that helps fund research and development.
That's right.
Trying new techniques. You can have that. You have the 1-2 punch system, right? Of the things that just absolutely make sense. And I'd put housing in that same bracket. Think about the negotiating power, purely from a market forces capitalist perspective. What's the negotiating power of the bottom 20% of the poorest people in the country that absolutely need housing, not optional? Right? And again, either the profits go to slum landlords, or the state could run that and make a profit from it, because many countries have done this, right? Built social housing. It's a step on the ladder. There's rules and stuff. So in Patrick's example, if someone was running it as a junkie brothel, they could get kicked out. But you just have so much more negotiating power when you don't go, just let people sort it out for themselves, let the market sort it out for itself. And if you, as I said, like it's the same with student loans, right? If I go to a bank and ask for a loan, there's only so much negotiating power I do. If a millionaire goes, the bank's going to treat him like a VIP. But how many middle class kids are there going to university? And how many billions of dollars does that represent in negotiating power? They should be getting the best interest deal possible. They should be a combined, unified, like negotiating force.
But even
of $1 billion getting the best interest rate ever. And so some things it just doesn't make sense to have predatory market forces making the worst for people. And that's where I think we probably agree.
Yeah. But so let's take student loans, for example. It's not collateralized traditionally, right?
The hope so it has been sometimes in Europe where the student unions used to negotiate with the banks and be like, hi, we're here representing 100,000 people.
Right.
What rate can you give us? What rate can you give us?
Yeah. And so we don't have that here. But we have a universal system in terms of student loan. I mean, in terms of student loan distribution. I mean, it's not capped by. I don't think so. It's not capped by income. I guess my point is that if I look at the default rates, the U.S. Department of Education default rates, I think it's like only 30% of people actually pay their student loans. This is prior to COVID coming in. So I guess the idea is that if I'm a bank, if I'm some lending institution, what incentive or what type of penalty can I levy on somebody to get my money back? And of course, in the 1990s, federal loans, you could no longer discharge them in bankruptcy. And in 2006, it was private loans. And so that was one of the things that they got to get security. And the banks lobbied heavy for that for the private part. That was under Bush. But I guess my idea always on student loans is, okay, let's say for instance we go around, wave a magic wand and just forget all that.
Minor point, sorry. Again.
Yeah.
Clinton set that up. Right, so
he did.
Some people blame Bush, but it's the 1-2.
That's
punch,
right. It's the 1-2 punch. Clinton was a better Republican than George Bush was. Totally if you go back and look at his whole administration, he put in both his Treasury secretaries came from Goldman Sachs. Mm-hmm. I mean, he married the Democratic Party to Wall Street. If the Democrats want to know how they got in the situation they're in, just go back to Bill Clinton in the 90s.
I will agree 1,000% with that.
And Obama's response to the financial crash was to bring Goldman Sachs deeper in the Treasury, right?
And bring them in and say, hey, I'm on your side. He gets no criticism for that. When I tell people he said that, they tell me I'm lying. I'm like, no, he did that. Not one Wall Street banker got locked up. And people want to know why people in America, matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, is mad as hell. Because the people who made the biggest mistakes paid no penalty. They got rewarded for it.
This is exactly. Yeah.
So I don't think we're
I'm telling you right now, you would have fit in well at Occupy Wall Street. So. And I'm not kidding. I'm very serious.
I'm too much of a capitalist, man. I'm looking for profit. I am for profit.
But what we have right now in a lot of ways isn't necessarily capitalism. Like, it is an oligarchy. It is this rotating door in Washington.
This is a neo-feudalist system where everybody at the top got it.
The winners, they're picking choosing the losers, and that's kind of the inherent issue that we have. Where it's like, man, I wish that we had the system that like heavy capitalists always talk about, because at least then it's more of a meritocracy. Mm-hmm. Where now it just feels like we have an elite class that protects only their interests, and regardless of who's in power, Obama or Bush or whoever, or even Trump, in many ways he didn't do what he said he was going to do because he was captured by those same powers. Yeah. Where he was to the left of Hillary on a lot of things, which is wild. It is wild.
Not if you know his record, it's not.
Yeah. Well, no, but I'm just saying, like, the Democrats shouldn't be to the right on economic issues, but they were to the right of Trump.
That was the Clintonite strategy, though, and that's why the GOP has, at this point, gone completely insane, in my opinion. It was because in the 90s, Bill Clinton was able to capture the votes of the conservative middle class by denouncing radical Republicans while simultaneously appropriating a lot of their economic theories.
So I suppose if you turn right three times, exactly you end up going left, right?
Yeah.
Yep, and gave the middle finger to the working class of the Democratic Party, and then they got left. They got left alone.
Chris,
and then
like you said earlier, that the negotiating power. I think it is part of the plan that the negotiating power of the bottom 20% is close to zero. You see now that COVID has come, you've got places where the minimum wage in the Midwest, the minimum wage is $7.25, and you've got McDonald's and Wendy's offering people $15, $16 an hour, $500 signing bonus. They could always afford this. Yep. They just didn't want to.
Absolutely.
So
that's right.
Yeah, I mean,
that's right.
What I would say, as far as one of the big problems with this is that we are using markets as our intelligence system. And the reason why is that markets are inherently biased towards previous actors within the market. The way you can understand this is if you're betting on a horse and you're looking at the Vegas odds. If someone comes in and drops $100 million on a horse, people will see that and they will rush over and they'll bet on that same horse, even if the person who dropped the $100 million is a total idiot.
I think we need to disambiguate though, right?
Yeah.
Because it's been long known that Wall Street and Main Street just have no correlation these days, right? What the stock?
No,
every time there's bad news, my stocks go up. It's bonkers. I've made money on the stock market doing the opposite to what you should do. If anything you've read is oh my god, what's that terrible news? I'll buy. Fuck. Probably go to the moon. Yep. It's just nuts. But so that's the confusing thing is that when I talk about negotiating power, an actual democracy where your negotiating power is based on how many people you represent, and even if you can club together as a union, that still represents a lot of money. But you're right, that gets dwarfed by the trillions that hedge funds are
But I guess what? Go ahead. I'm sorry. But I guess I would say, well, what's wrong with this part that we have now going on with the Great Resignation? I mean, this is neo-collective bargaining. People are telling the companies, you know what, the hell with you. But they're not joining unions, right? We're less than 10% union membership in the USA. But we got McDonald's now saying, we'll pay you $15, $20 exactly, and I still won't fucking work for you. So you know what? Keep it going, and then I'll show up. I like this system because this is, in essence, a market system where COVID came along, and people said, you know what? Fuck this job. Fuck the people I work for. I'm sick of this shit because these motherfuckers can pay if they want to. Excuse my language from person. But they can pay if they want to. They fucking don't want to. They got record fucking profits. And now you can't find nobody. So, when I go to these fast food places now, with my wife or whoever, I fucking love it, even though I got to wait longer. Because I'm saying, you know what? It is time for us to give the finger to this elite. Because the elites are really what our problem is. I really believe that. And I think that there are lots of people on both sides who've come to realize our fucking problem is the donor class and it was the consultant class. It was the motherfuckers who was the consultants who was doing the work for the donors. We've come to realize these are the motherfuckers that's fucking you. Whether you're black, white, gay, or straight, doesn't matter. And I think now what's beginning to happen is now they have these jobs, they can't fill these positions, and now they're saying, oh, we need to pay more. Even my job, I won't mention where I work. They decided to have this big old meeting, and we want to let everybody know that we're gonna invest in employees 100%. And I was thinking, it's the first time I heard that. Why when you're scared that somebody's gonna say fuck you, you want to invest, right? So I just think that this is I don't and I have the freedom to say that now because if they fired me, I can go somewhere else now because everybody's on the goddamn corner hiring. So I'm not even afraid.
I am loving
no
this. Comrade Patrick, hell yeah.
But it is what's evolved about me from the moderate part is once I did realize that it was the elites that was doing this shit. It was the elites that put Citizens United together. So now fucking McDonald's has more fucking political power than the entire suburb I live in because they can spend as much fucking money as they want. It's just this shit's crazy.
This is what on the left is referred to as achieving class consciousness. So that's really, really exciting. And we talked a little bit about populism, so maybe we should move on to that after Paul has a chance to speak.
Yeah, no, all I was going to say is, when you compare the power that the corporate and the ruling class has to the bottom of the country is suffering so badly, has no money, living paycheck to paycheck, and piling on debt on top of that just so they can pay their bills or buy food because wages have been so deflated, not keeping up with inflation, not keeping up with productivity for decades. And that has, on top of the fact that, we have these trade agreements where I looked up what the major exports of Vietnam are. It's broadcasting equipment, telephones, circuitry, footwear, leather footwear, the majority of which are coming to the United States. Everything's being built.
They also
somewhere
make a
else.
lot of great backpacking equipment. I'm a big fan of some
and
of
great backpack equipment. But like rural America, and because I mean I live in the South and I ride motorcycles. So if you ride motorcycles, you go through back roads like state highways. Those towns have been decimated. They're destroyed. There's no manufacturing where there used to be manufacturing. There's no jobs where there used to be jobs. There's just drug addiction, pure drug addiction.
Huge drug trade too.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean
huge heroin going on
terrible.
in rural America. Now, here's a point I want to make. There's no difference between what's going on in rural America and what's going on in the inner city. Because that same shit happened in the 70s. Where deindustrialization happened and shipped jobs overseas and said, fuck these motherfuckers in the inner city. And then you got drugs, you got crack, you got all this other kind of stuff. So a great book by that Charles Murray, conservative guy, wrote a book called The State of White America, 1960 to 2010. And that book was riveting. And then Hillbilly Lethargy was another one. But that book was riveting for me to just read it because I had no clue. Even though I'm a black dude, I had no clue that white people were going through some of the same shit. I did not know. And then I said, no wonder motherfuckers are mad. They're not mad at me because I'm a black dude. They don't give a shit. Who cares? What they're mad at is, you know what? I'm feeling the same shit you are feeling. This fucking system fucked me too. So it's kind of like, if we ever get to a point where black and white, no matter what the class level, realizes, you know what? That motherfucker's our enemy, then we can overthrow that particular system. And it's going to have to be that donor class system that says, I can give as much money as I want. And you know what? I got these politicians. I have bought all these motherfuckers off. Trump had that message when he came in and said, I can buy all these motherfuckers off. And I was saying, yep, you got it. The problem is he was so fucking crazy. I never realized the guy was that much of a nut. But I was like, he's saying what we want to hear. Look, everybody on this stage, guys, listen, I could buy these motherfuckers off by the time I get to my limo. But he just fucking crazy. I was just ranting about Trump the other day. I said if Trump would have toned down his crazy ass message and stopped that media shit, because he has this love-hate relationship with the media. He wants love from these motherfuckers. If he'd have toned that shit down 10%, he'd have won re-election.
Too much ego.
If he'd have got on America, he'd have got on TV and did one address and said, look, I know what you're going through. The same message he told his crazy ass supporters. I love you. I'm sorry. We're sorry. I know you're hurting. He'd have said the same shit on a televised address. He'd have won re-election. But he's fucking nuts. He's crazy as fuck. Yeah. I never knew that.
How calculated the Democrats were in deciding to pick Biden, the most establishment candidate they could get away with.
Terrible.
And honestly, it's the same shit with Hillary, right?
Yes.
Like we all would have preferred Bernie. I would have loved to have seen Bernie Trump. I would have loved to have seen that election.
I worked for Bloomberg. I actually went and worked for the Bloomberg campaign. He was a fucking disaster. Oh, yes, he's a disaster. I'm going to fucking say it. I don't care. I was under a non-disclosure agreement for a while, so I was being a good guy. I don't give a fuck. His campaign was a fucking disaster. It was filled with people, okay, we were making 70, 80. Some people were making over $100,000 to do fucking nothing. And they were going around doing absolutely fucking nothing. He thought he could run a digital game. He thought he was going to fucking use Facebook and Instagram to do all these digital ads. He got on the first debate, and Elizabeth Warren kicked his ass. And I was thinking, like, how the fuck did he let us fucking sucker punch him like that? You didn't see that coming? He didn't. Now, that is also the hubris.
He's used to being surrounded by yes men. He has no concept of,
Exactly. His shit was a disaster. So I walked away from that saying,
I will say that Bloomberg destroyed the New York City that I love. He's always been a complete and utter idiot. So I'm very glad to see him crash and burn, and I'm very glad you took a decent amount of his money with you when he left. That's awesome.
I sure the fuck did. And we got paid like almost a whole year. But remember, when he cut us off, everybody went to the media and told on his ass. And so they start spilling the secrets, and that's when he came and said, oh, we're gonna pay y'all and keep y'all health care and stuff like that. Just don't say nothing else. Because it's elite shit though.
Keep paying everyone through the election even if they lost, and he just cut it off. And he's like, keep
and
be gone.
At which I'm talking to you guys from now. And this fucking phone.
Thank you, Mayor Bloomberg. You finally did something right.
Right. But it was the elite. It's another thing. It was the elite, and if he would have got on the stage with Trump, Trump would have kicked his ass, because he would have not have. Trump would have just kept talking over him over and over and over, and he would have not been able to do shit. And so I I look at it in retrospect, and I'll let you guys go. I'm glad his ass lost because he was nothing but another elitist with a softer fucking tone. He was going to go in and do the same shit. He's just going to be a little softer with it.
You're 100% right.
And
that's what the Democrats want at the end of the day. Is half of their criticism of Trump was, but he's so rude and coarse, and you're like,
yes,
people are angry. Like,
he's nasty when he talks. People are fucking angry.
That was the part of Trump that people liked. You know, it was a friend of mine.
Yes, he was projecting.
A friend of mine on the right, actually, he talked about how, like, one of the reasons he liked Trump is he doesn't like Trump personally, but he loves that Trump is mean because, like, when you're going for a lawyer, you know, do you want the nice guy lawyer? Yes, or do you want the guy that's going to do everything in his power to actually win? And, you know, Trump was an insane moron, but he was still speaking to that level of frustration. And again, like, this, if we had Bernie in 2016, it would have been totally different. Because, like, my dad, lifelong Republican, was ready to vote for Bernie Sanders before Hillary screwed him out over Trump.
He got a lot of.
I think Trump
gained a lot of ground.
What often happens if Trump had been against Bernie, he would have to maybe shifted left on some things to capture that same ground. So even if Trump had won, I think it would have been a different Trump we would have seen. Yeah. Whereas Trump versus Hillary,
at the end of the day,
that was easy for him. He could be whatever he fucking wanted.
It was fucking easy. But don't get me started on her because people were fucking running around like she fucking got it. And I'm like, do you know the amount of people who can't stand her fucking guts? Like, seriously. But if I understand why they don't like her ass. Because she reminds you of that fucking librarian that you're like, she's always fucking telling me to tuck my pants in. Mm-hmm. She's always saying something. So in essence,
I care about that. I care that she goes to meetings with Goldman Sachs and Lockheed Martin. And
that too.
Hillary Clinton was sponsored by World War III. It would have had to happen.
Exactly. Yes. She has a public perception and a private perception, and that should have scared the shit out of people.
I remember. Yes. Okay, so some friends of mine, when Hillary was announced, they got together to do I'm not kidding, a impromptu flash mob of people dancing in pantsuits in Union Square to celebrate how excited they were. Yeah, and I'm sitting there and I'm like watching this, and this is people that I know, and I'm just like, oh my God, you morons.
This is just the Democrats all day long. What was it the other day? You had the cast of Hamilton singing about January the 6th, and you're like, this is the response to this.
The kente cloth during George Floyd. It's the fucking pandering that's so so fucking whack, and you're like, that's why I don't fuck with y'all. Because this shit is whack. You don't have to do this to get my attention. And you don't have to do this to get everybody's attention. Just tell the truth.
Where's any sort of policing and reform bill? Like, I realize that most of that's at state power, but the
nowhere
does have the ability to enforce some sort of regulation, tracking of murders, things like that. Yeah. They haven't done shit. Like, where is it?
No, they threw it on your guy.
It got a bunch of likes on Twitter, so that's cool. That's what matters.
Yeah, what was the guy, the Republican guy, the black guy, Tim Scott? They threw it on him and said, he's the guy that's supposed to be doing it. He didn't get it right. I knew he wasn't going to do shit either because he doesn't run shit on that side. So it's just, I like that Trump was talking shit to all those establishment Republicans on the stage. I loved every moment of it because he was saying what we've been wanting to say to them, but we can't get close to him because they're surrounded by donors and they got all this protection. And he was able to do that. The problem is that Trump he's that person that you say, if he had just, I don't know, man. It's just not in him to do that, though. He's not the conforming type.
Fuck it vote.
Yeah. Well,
he was a fucking vote. That's exactly.
Trump is also the guy. What's really important to understand about Trump, because if you look into his history, it's very clear that his father didn't love him. And he has had a hole in himself, ever since then. So he's the guy who will essentially tell you whatever you want to hear, just so long as you like him. But again, there's nothing beyond that. He doesn't have an ideology.
Also, I think there's something about that New York money that I recognize as being most similar in America. The most similar part to England is that East Coast elite shit, and I recognize that.
That East Coast elite shit.
Right? And you can just tell Trump spent his whole life trying to get approval from those people, and always
from that elite, from the elites. He wanted that elite love.
To have been a Democrat.
Always rejected. Yeah. So, you're too fucking
coarse.
crazy. You just burped after you drunk
refined
something.
enough.
Yeah. He hated that.
This goes.
Yeah.
We brought up
Yep,
college
yep.
earlier, and this goes into something that I have a theory about higher education, and that part of it, especially in the Ivy League, but I think kind of across the board, college is not just intended to teach the person like how to do a specific job or whatever. It is teaching you to mimic the class behaviors of the wealthiest people, and Trump
Absolutely.
always had working class behaviors, and I really think that is
Yep.
one of the reasons why. Yeah.
He always did. And that's the reason why he appealed. He always had that working, and his dad instilled that shit in him. And so Trump is a guy that we're going to spend a lot of years talking about, and they're going to spend a lot of years researching, because I will still defend him today and say, Trump's not a racist. He only cares if you like him. He doesn't give a fuck your color. He just wants you to like him. He doesn't care. Now, that has its drawbacks, because he's subject to the last motherfucker you talk to. If you I think Wall Street Journal did an article where they interviewed Jared Kushner, and they said that dealing with Trump is like Alice in Wonderland. It's like the fat cat from Alice in Wonderland. When you don't know where you're going, any way will get you there. And if you really think about it, he's just a winger. He's just been winging this shit. Like, I don't fucking know how to be president. What the fuck? Just get out there and talk some shit, I guess.
It's remarkably similar to Boris Johnson. I often think it's an unfair comparison, but I've
Yes.
heard from behind the scenes,
Yes.
especially recent negotiations between
Yes.
England and France, people come out of a meeting with Boris Johnson and go, sounds good. He told us everything we wanted to hear because he wanted our approval during
Yes.
the meeting. And then afterwards
He
they
wanted
find
our
out,
approval.
sorry, we didn't have a deal.
He's on something different. Yes. Yes.
By the
That's
way, I've
it.
been meaning
Yep,
to bring
yep.
this up, just in case, like public service announcement. I haven't read the Charles Murray book that you cited, but I just did want to warn
Yes.
listeners. So Charles Murray also wrote The Bell Curve, which is complete bullshit.
Yeah, he wrote the bill. Yeah, he's a fucking. Charles Murray's a racist. I'll give it to him. However, I think what he realized was he had spent so much time, and some of these think tanks too had spent so much time on race and intelligence and shit like that they didn't see that the coming apart was really going to be an American thing, and that the withering away of the middle class, that drugs, crime, and all that shit was going to hit white America too. And so by the time Murray came out with the book in 2010, he was kind of like, and you can go look him up on the Hoover Institute. He did a long interview. You don't even have to read the book. You just listen to him. And he's on there talking, and he's kind of like, oh shit, I'm kind of late with this shit. Like, we really got to change. Like, if we don't change, we're not going to have, like, white people are not getting married either. Black people ain't getting married. I think our black people's illegitimacy rate maybe 83%.
Yeah.
I think white, they broke it down based on, okay, if you go to college or not.
Really go out the
it's like
window when you have a
65.
population on crack or on meth. Like, it's just-
Yeah, that don't want to get married, right? Or that divorce is like fucking crazy. I mean, so
Also, like,
you know,
if we're talking about
that's-
like marriage, like, I mean, I know that I delayed getting married for years and years until I felt I was in a financial position where I actually could
same
get
with having
married.
kids, yeah.
So, like, if we want more marriage,
Right.
we've got to raise the
You gotta-
bottom 20%.
yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
seems to me, and this is something that I really like, because it feels to me like there is I think the right and the left are coming to very, very similar conclusions, but we're not
They
talking
are.
to each other enough. We're shouting at each other.
Yes.
Like we're Chris mentioned at the beginning of this, like, his objection to quote-unquote tribalism, and I have been saying for years, before the right kind of co-opted that term, I've been saying for years, tribalism is a hell of a drug. And I think I think that, like, we can probably agree on the problem seems to be entrenched power and the power that wields over our economic and political system. The hard thing is how do we get out of this position, because the people who hold the levers of power have different interests than the vast majority of the country.
There you go. Right. Doesn't matter how many people you mobilize if you can't outspend the fucking Koch brothers.
Well, brother, one of them is thankfully dead.
Oh, brother, David did die. He did die. Yeah, but it's still here, right? And so, we look at that, and then we try to mix in Trumpism, and I always ask people, Trumpism It's a mixture of a whole lot of shit, because it really is. There's some nativism in it. There's some populism. There's some fucking there's some fascism in it. But the most important part that identifies Trumpism is a disregard for what's true.
Yeah.
Right? You think about it, motherfucker. You want to be fuck all the other shit. If you want to be a Trumper, just fuck. I don't believe in any of that shit. You know, the idea that even with the vaccine situation, the idea that we have this as a problem is crazy. And so now when Trump comes out and says, "Yeah, I got boosted," then people are like, "Fuck you, motherfucker." And I think that that's what's going to be his demise. I don't know if the New York lady's going to indict him. I don't know if Garland's going to indict him. He finally told the truth, and now he's like, "Oh shit, I told these motherfuckers to get vaccinated." But that's what happens when you run a cult like movement. Motherfuckers turn on you.
I mean, that gets us into you know, QAnon. And I think I brought this up in the emails beforehand because, you know, we essentially have, like on January 6th, you know, we had an attempted insurrection by an actual cult that, you know, believed in that JFK Jr. was going to come back and be Trump's running mate.
Yeah, you know, they were here in Dallas, man, over 500 people mobilized twice. I saw it over at the JFK spot. And I sent it to my wife. I said, this shit is serious when I tell you that cult thinking this shit is real. And this is not religious. It's secular.
It's secular,
right?
but they still, they have religious. A religious level of fervor to it.
There you go.
And like, what's...
The energy's got to go somewhere. You got to put it in something.
It has to go somewhere.
The political system.
There's no politics. There's no community. And churches are dying. QAnon is the answer, I guess. Yeah.
Churches are dying. Really
well, it's not...
right. But all of those institutions, real quick, and I'll let you go. I'm sorry. All of those institutions in some aspect has let us down, though. The church has even let us down. You think about George Bush and faith-based initiatives. Churches got money and got political. I'm for this, I'm for that. And all of a sudden, this pastor don't give a fuck anymore, whether he's black or white. He's just built this big-ass church off of faith-based bonds, initiatives, and some church bonds he got. And so now people saying, I don't trust my fucking pastor. My doctor, well, fuck, he got me doped up on opioids. I don't trust his ass no more. Right? The teacher, well, this is the same lady who told me I wasn't going to be shit. Well, I don't trust her ass either. Who do I trust? I don't trust my job. These motherfuckers, I cut my finger. They told me, hey, you might want to go to the health center. This NDA.
I'm recalling
who do you trust?
I was working as an actor in an outdoor drama production. I was thrown off a horse and I hit a tree and was laid out on my back for 3-4 days, couldn't move. And I remember my main interaction with my employer was them doing their best to try to talk me out of claiming any kind of workers' comp and seeing a doctor.
Yes. That's right.
National health care.
And you come here to Texas.
It would be.
Right. You come here to Texas, we have tort malpractice reform, right? Ushered in by your boy Greg Abbott, who's the governor, who fucking got a $10 million malpractice suit when he was 20 years ago when he was jogging and a fucking tree hit him. And he's about talking about tort reform. That's just a crazy... They've all let us down. And that's just what it is.
Populism get dangerous because we alluded to the fasci vibes, and I agree that the system's fucked and needs an overhaul. Yeah. But the criticism that's often levied against populism is but be careful because that's the path to fascism, right?
I mean, I don't think so. Populism, I don't believe, is the path to fascism. Fascists, they used populist rhetoric, and people will say stuff. One of the biggest myths that you see repeated over and over again is that Hitler was elected. He was not elected; he was appointed. The Nazis, even at the height of their power, they never managed a majority of votes.
A good amount, though, right?
Definitely a number of people fell under his spell. I won't say that because you look at some of the, I guess for lack of a better word, deplorables that crawled out of the woodwork to support Trump. Like there are people in our society who clearly have a very warped view of reality and have very warped tribalistic ideas about how we should run things. But at the same time, I think it's like when they talk about they're like, oh, democracy is mob rule. Not really, because the mob is never everyone. That's just a large, vocal, active group of people. It is a minority imposing its will on the majority by force. It's essentially doing the same thing the state does, just in a very small capacity, a microcosm of the state. And so, like, if we were to have actual democracy, real, it wouldn't be mob rule. It wouldn't. Real populism is is projected by the actual masses, not these tiny groups of people that say that they represent the masses, but in reality simply do not.
Yeah,
every cult claims that they're supported by voiceless millions. Right?
And so often the people who are equating populism to fascism are the people whose entrenched power is going to be threatened by a populist uprising against them. Like even the media elite, who are all at this point coming from Yale or Harvard at like the New York Times or Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, like their power is going to be threatened. And
that's right.
Their society that they live in, which is very separate from the society that like I live in or any of us live in. It's a very different world. And populism is a threat to that kind of Clintonian politics that they espouse, right? Their West Wing type ideology that they think exists and makes them a more moral person than everyone else. So whenever I see people attacking populism, I always look at who it is. I'm like, I don't really know if I trust what you're saying, buddy, because you're kind of the people that we're trying to take down right now.
Yeah, anything that's popular with people is branded as populism.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, that's democracy.
Yeah, that's just what happened. It was like when they found a picture of Bernie Sanders in the USSR in like 1975, and we're like, well, clearly he's not electable. And I'm like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? But they floated that up because he was doing well in Nevada.
You talked about the media earlier, and I think it's an issue we all have with partisan hackery there, and the fact that it's just been gouged, and so now they have more interest than ever just to print a press release from a corporation without reading it. Honestly, the best way to get an advert in a newspaper now isn't to be in the ad section; it's to be in the main section, right? And this might be the most European thing you gents have ever heard. I think it probably really smacks to American ears, but I was thinking about this, about the need to have like a non-partisan, not-for-profit source of news. But does that sound alien and terrible to you?
No, we have PBS here. Well, we have PBS, which is
NPR,
not-for-profit, government-funded.
People respect and trust that, or does it get accused of bias?
They used to. They don't anymore. But you have to attribute that to the genius of Roger Ayers with Fox News. And he was a genius when at the time period he created Fox News, 97, the height of the Clinton years. Right, the Republicans they have momentum. 1994, they take the House back. So, the whole idea of him and we got to talk about Rush too. But I am a Rush Limbaugh fan. I won't lie to you. I'm a Rush Limbaugh fan. So I didn't cry when he died. I was a little upset though. He was good at what he does. I didn't really care about the content. I just loved the delivery because he could just hook, line, and sink you. But I would say that
it's like liking a UFC fighter that isn't a good person outside of the ring.
Yeah, that's right. Right. We have NPR, we have PBS, but I think that the big part is that we have to do something about Section 230. Right. That these tech companies they're exempt from liability. Right. They've taken this law, right, which was designed to allow them to get up off the ground, and they are now not responsible, right, for all this stupid ass content that they put up. That now we're in social tribes, even on social media. I see so much stupid shit on there. I even report a lot of shit, and they will come and tell me we're not taking it down because that person, it doesn't go against our community standards. But I've been actually put in Facebook jail last month, and I was pissed like a mother. I mean, I felt like I was in real jail.
They put me in Facebook jail for calling someone a walnut.
I don't know what the fuck I said.
That's awesome.
I don't know if you're familiar with Varoufakis, the Greek finance minister. And Zizek, brilliant Marxist philosopher. And between them, they did a great talk about how we're living in a state of techno-feudalism. And no matter how bad feudalism got, right, they couldn't tell you who you're allowed to talk with, what you're allowed to see, where you're allowed to go, right? But the current state we live in, they have exactly that power. They can remove your vocal cords. They can stop you talking to certain people. They can tell you what to see. You have to see this advert in order to continue.
You have to see this.
It is bad.
Well, it's such a terrible feedback loop, too, because everyone is then being fed things that, number one, make them angry, and then continue to enforce what they already believe, and they're only talking to other people that think like them, and then everyone else is othered. So that I think someone already said this, but we aren't talking to each other. And it's not even that we're talking past each other. It's that you can't engage with the other side. And, that's a huge problem on the left that I see with a lot of people that I know, where they're like, oh, well, I can't talk to that person, or like that person voted for Trump. And I'm like, that doesn't speak to their moral character. Like, you don't know their reasons for doing what they did.
Me and Brent met in a Facebook group where it's called Left Tube Posting. They spend most of their time trying to dissect, you say you're an ANCAP, but what type of ANCAP are you? Oh, well, you're responsible for this massacre in Hungary 50 years ago. It's like, oh my fucking God, guys. We can't agree on anything.
The left is huge when it comes to the circular firing squad, and I think we can talk about next, because you wanted to talk about extreme leftism, Patrick. Yeah,
left-wing extremism.
So I have been there in the street with the extreme left, via Occupy Wall Street for years.
Well, can we define our terms? Sorry, what does Pat mean by left?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What do you
left-wing extremism? Well, so in the traditional sense, right, we would say there's not a discipline for left-wing extremism like it is for right-wing extremism, right? We already say, okay, right-wing extremism is nativism, racism,
theocracy,
all these different, Islamophobia, all of that. But on the left, there's not a definition that goes that direction, because from what I've seen, most of the left-wing radical groups were always in response to something, while right-wing groups are in reaction to a demographical shift, a change in status, or something like that.
So seem to be reactionary, right? It's easier for people to define what they hate.
Yes.
Have you ever been to a
That's right.
about music, and they tell you the 10 bands they hate, and you're like, cool.
Okay, but what do you like?
Any recommend? And I find political conversations so poor for that. It's that all of these talking heads, all of these YouTubers do great takedown videos of why this guy's a shitbird. And you're like, fine, but I try really hard to get intelligent guests on and find a greater truth, because it's very easy for either side to be like, hey, look at this shit tweet. You're like, that's not news. That's not.
Someone has a bad opinion.
Someone online said something stupid should not be your headline in a newspaper.
Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert on every website, newspaper. I'm like, okay, we get it. They say dumb things. Jesus. What else is happening? We get it.
We get it.
They're crazy.
We get it. Yes. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Matt Gaetz. He says a lot of crazy shit. He's a nut. Okay, we got it.
That's my question really, Pat, is that, everything we talked about, like populist dismantling of the oligarchy, the corrupt feudalism, most people would describe that as extreme left position, no?
Well,
if you're right wing, yeah.
So
the only place I can go to get if I want to hear about Antifa or Black Lives Matter as an extremist group, I just turn on Joy Reid, or I turn on CNN, right? MSNBC, one of those people. And I'm saying that to say it's equally problematic, because there is left-wing extremism. The problem, though, is when you begin to go into that, especially in academia, because our universe has been politicized so much too. You're free to talk about right-wing extremism because it's talking about racism and all Islamophobia and all of that. But if you talk about left-wing extremism, then it's, oh, well, you're going to be disassociated. And I think a lot of professors have gone that. There's a professor, I was looking at C-SPAN about a few weeks ago, Dr. Kenneth something. He's at the University of Pittsburgh. He's talking about right-wing extremism. Somebody calls in on C-SPAN. Hey, you talking about right-wing extremism? What about Black Lives Matter and Antifa? They're not extreme. I want to hear something about that. And he was like, I don't know anything about Black Lives Matter. And I was thinking, like, you do, but you're afraid that if you express yourself, they're going to say you're racist. And that's what the problem is. Now, watch this real quickly. The Capitol has been attacked about 5 times. How many of us knew that?
I mean, I was aware of that because the
Capitol.
I heard the last time. I thought last time was 200 years
ago.
So
1915, right? So a bomb went off in Robert Byrd's office in 1983 by the Puerto Rican separatist left-wing group. The resistance movement, resistance unit, 1983. 1954, the Puerto Rican separatists, which the resistance unit were actually all women, left-wing group, but the Puerto Rican separatists set off a bomb in 54.
Yeah, I would blame the fact that they're women.
1972, they're women. 72, the Capitol was bombed. by the Weather Underground, Bill Ayers. Remember Bill Ayers went out, I did it, I don't apologize for it. So all those are left-wing groups. But let's think of this. And this is why I said there's bias on both sides. I haven't seen that I found that in an article in the Washington Post. I found no left-wing outlet that would have connected the dots and said, hey, the Capitol's been under assault before. Here are some times that they have. Because if they do, then they're going to have to talk about that's left-wing extremism. And maybe they're afraid that the right will say, see, we told you that's the extremism. I don't know. But I think that's where I say we have a problem with truth. Because I don't have a problem with this is what happened. This is who did it. Now, I'm willing to say left-wing extremism on its surface, the definition varies from left-wing extremism to right-wing extremism. Weather Underground and some of these other left-wing extremism groups that were very popular in the 70s and 80s that the FBI was busting. They were up against animal rights, against Vietnam occupation, right? Those they weren't against nativism and racism.
So to jump in really quickly, because
historical, can we?
Yeah.
I just want to talk about BLM rather than the history.
Yeah.
Although quickly, Puerto Rico
Sure,
has
let's
had
do
a
it.
bad rap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely taxation without representation
Very
going
much.
on in Puerto Rico.
Well, so
Yes,
I wanted to give
that's
my
right.
definition and kind of give a bit of an explanation as to why you may be seeing this, Patrick. So when I consider left-wing extremism, what I would say is what you need to do to look to identify who are the extremists, and I myself am a self-described extremist, probably on the left, though I disagree with them quite a bit. It's how they respond to capitalism, and I think that is the key wedge issue that takes the neoliberals, the Democrats essentially, and the actual leftists. If you are for some sort of radical change that eliminates capitalism as a system and brings on another system, hopefully socialism or communism, that would be what would identify you as an extremist. I don't think extremists are bad necessarily. Like, if your problems are extreme, and we've got global warming will probably be ending all life on this planet as we know it in the next few years.
Yep.
You need an extreme response.
That's a bit hyperbolic, but
I mean,
life will get shit for a lot of people, and there'll be mass migration. But
dude, I don't know.
It will end all life on Earth.
I didn't say it would end all life on Earth. I said it would end it as we know it.
Okay.
In Nashville, we're getting tornadoes. In Nashville, we're getting
that's
tornadoes
where
in
I would-
December, which is wild. So
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah. So I would say a left-wing extremist in the context of American, would be socialists, communists, and anarchists.
Wouldn't we all be labelled left-wing extremists by half of the things we've said in this conversation in America?
Absolutely, but also,
Yeah.
that shows the, I guess, derangement of American politics. And this goes down to why probably the Weather Underground was not really brought up, in relation to the January 6th. Because I don't think you can compare January 6th to, like, the Weather Underground bombings. The Weather Underground never killed anyone. And if you look at, like, Antifa, a great example is with Antifa, has never killed anyone. Yeah, like...
No, they haven't. They did 20 years worth of research. But if you go to Fox News, they draw all the comparisons. Remember, they spent all of Obama years talking about Bill Ayers and Weather Underground.
And similarly,
So-
but look,
I found it
2018,
the coverage of
2018.
BLM.
Yeah, well,
It's
hang
been-
on. 2018, 100% of the politically motivated murders were carried out by the extreme right, and they've been doing this for years. And this actually goes back to what happened with the Weather Underground and the United States response to the hippie movement, to the anti-war movement. The far left in the United States has been completely destroyed for the most part. It's only now starting to come back.
Absolutely.
Now,
Yes.
and as a result of that, we haven't had a lot of really dangerous situations with dangerous left-wing extremists. Will it happen as the left grows? Absolutely, I think, because there are people who. There are people, like, even at Occupy Wall Street, there were people saying we need to be violent. Half the time, in my opinion, they were infiltrators, and then the other half they were just genuinely crazy people. But
Yep.
I guess my point being is that I don't think at the moment, the extreme right is directly comparable to the extreme left in America. And I think actually what we need more extreme left, because I talked earlier about how I think of ideas and the public discourse as an ecosystem. There's a species, the extreme left is a species that has been almost entirely wiped out. And if you do wipe it out, and if it doesn't make a comeback, it's going to destabilize the entire ecosystem, because we only understand ourselves in relation to some outside thing that is not us. So that's just that's my definition of it, and I just wanted to go into the history there. So Christian, back to you.
Yeah, well, Paul turned me on to Matt Taibbi. Is it?
Oh, he's great.
Love him.
Yeah. And he raised the flag. You know, he's considered left of left, I guess, but also raises the flag when the left are being bonkers and weird too. And he raised a similar point you just made, Pat, to the point that, look, say what you want about BLM, but you can't say what you want about BLM. And that's a problem. I think, as we've all alluded to, the discourse is often so unfair. You know, like there's a real propaganda push to portray them as a violent Stalinist organization that's about to eat our babies.
Yeah.
And so
what people have to understand about Marxists is
defensive, but it is true that kind of any criticism of anything someone from BLM does is insta branded as a racist hate crime. And that makes discourse difficult.
This is something that people need to understand, by the way, in America about Marxists. So Marxism in America has changed. And in my day, Marxists, were college guys with beards that try to sleep with your girlfriend. Like now that it's not. Now Marxists are like teenagers
with your girlfriend or your boyfriend in a polycule.
Yeah, exactly. Or teenagers who are going to flip out on Twitter about what's going on. Like that.
Oh, and they have the cat ears, right?
Yeah. Oh my god. So like, people like. There seems to be this like 1950s Red Scare era fear of Marxists in the country. And they'll say like, oh, Black Lives Matter is Marxist because a couple of the leaders have avowed like Marxist ideas. But
and I've heard
they're
some
not
really
like
bad faith criticism that are like, people died in China, therefore we must arrest everyone involved with Antifa. You're like,
exactly. So I feel like, and I've been on RT defending Antifa, which was very fun. I compared them to Batman. But like, yeah, I mean,
right.
So,
because typically most of them are unarmed at these
yeah,
protests,
well, they're definitely
right?
unarmed. Yeah, these are kids, 20-somethings. I have a friend who served a year for actions. I think it was over the Women's March. He did some Antifa actions like over the Women's March. He served a year. But like, when you compare Antifa to the freaking like Unite the Right, the very first thing those people did was kill someone. So our institutions are having a difficult time responding to far right extremism. I think Biden getting into office actually probably helped a little bit with that. But like, it's funny. When I was growing up, I would listen to Rage Against the Machine, and I'd be like, some of those who work forces are the same that burn crosses. And I'd be like, oh, that's a great lyric, but they're kind of overstating things. And now, as a nearly 40 years old, I'm like, yes, some of those who work forces are the same that burn crosses. Holy crap.
But Pat, what are your thoughts on? Because you wanted to raise left-wing extremism.
I did.
What do you think of the
I think that
between BLM and what happened last year, Capitol Hill?
I think that if whenever I hear that, I know where I can go and get that from. I know the source. I know I could go to conservative media and get that, because I think the response when it comes to extremism from the right at one point used to be, we denounce it. We hear it, we denounce it. But now it's, we hear it, we equate it. Hear what's going on over here. And so, ironically,
amplify it, we televise it, we interview the people.
We amplify. So it's Black Lives Matter. She's Marxist. She just bought 4 houses. She's taking money. It's funded by George Soros. Trump makes this big noise. He wants to make Antifa and Black Lives Matter domestic terrorist organizations. Bill Barr goes and designates Seattle, Portland, and New York anarchist jurisdictions. He put a memo out in 2020.
That was
anarchist
jurisdictions.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's so great.
But remember, there's no domestic terrorism. There's no laws on our books about domestic terrorism, right? I mean, it's not clear. Like, they can't come up and designate. It's not as easy
Family Guy
in terms
chart.
of.
They get out.
Yeah. So I think.
But
Yeah, go ahead. No.
Just quickly, what do you guys think about the idea that criticizing George Soros is anti-Semitic, or do you think there's a legitimate criticism of him there?
I mean, he's a billionaire, so fuck him. That's not that's not that's not anti-Semitic. But I think George Soros as a secret puppeteer controlling that is inherently anti-Semitic. I mean, that it comes. Yeah,
Absolutely.
And what's very important to understand, by the way, and this is, goes back to kind of so one of the, I forget who said this, but they said anti-Semitism is socialism for fools. And we were just talking about like how, Patrick, you may be on the right and I'm more or less on the very far left, but we're seeing the same kinds of problems, and you are developing what leftists would call class consciousness. You're realizing that the elites are screwing us. The anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that have been a part of the extreme right for decades, if not over 100 years. You think back to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. You think about Francisco Franco.
It's so frustrating because they're like, oh, there's a bunch of rich people controlling the world. You're like,
yes.
And they're Jewish. You're like, I don't care.
Exactly.
Let's focus on the first.
Doesn't matter.
So, and this is exactly what's happening in the sense that the system defends itself. It's like an AI, and one of the weapons that the system uses to defend itself is racism. What it's doing here is it is redirecting people's critique and their anger away from the ruling class and towards a specific subset of the population that has maybe a few members in the ruling class, but overall is just normal people. And so you get all of the people's anger and rage at the way they have been dehumanized and oppressed being targeted at something other than the source, while simultaneously perpetuating that system. The extreme right critique of of entrenched power, they need this conspiracy theory so that the actual powers that be are never threatened, and that's why you can't really have a fascism without some form of anti-Semitism or some other scapegoat taking that place.
It's amazing to me how George Soros is exempt from the benefits a person who's Jewish would get from being labeled anti-Semitism. Not saying that I don't mean benefits in terms of some privilege. I mean, there are certain protections that if you're Jewish that you are protected from, and one of those is anti-Semitism. But I remember hearing about George Soros, and I always heard it from conservative media, and I never heard of him, and then started looking them up, and I was like, okay, the way they're trying to make it seem, these are all his DAs. These are all George Soros DAs all around the country. And I'm like, you're kind of losing me there.
He funded and has for years a program because for years debate clubs, debate societies were all white kids, right? And it's one of the ways of getting in an Ivy League school is being good at debating. And one of the programs he funded,
and that's why I didn't start.
Inner city black kids learning to debate well, and now if you look, actually some of the best, because it's like slam poetry and they speak at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and these kids are fucking amazing, and sure enough a lot of them went on to be DAs. And the conspiracy is this was the plan all along. He's like buying the black vote for the Democrats.
Well, I mean, that's what happens with all the billionaires, though, right? Like with Bill Gates and the conspiracies around population control. They're not totally wrong in that Bill Gates did say that he was promoting vaccines as a way of reducing the birth rate in third world countries, because when you have...
Yeah, I mean,
That's the thing is that there's a grain of truth to it. That's kind of
version.
It is kind of what he was going for. Is that people have a ton of kids because of how many kids die of these
Half
diseases.
of them die. Yeah.
So then if you have more vaccines out there, so he did say that back in the 90s. So it's one of those things where it's like their ability to have so much money and wield so much power is going to just lead to people taking a bit of what they did and then crafting this wild conspiracy around it, which is what I find
there's a
about
great
conspiracy.
podcast. There's a great podcast I'll recommend. Not as good as Beyond Binary Thinking, obviously, but almost as good.
Podcast Authority.
Yeah, but almost as good as this program. It's QAnon Anonymous. They recently had a phenomenal episode where they brought in because it's not a QAnon podcast. It's a podcast that keeps an eye on and is critical of QAnon. They brought in a guy, like a journalist, who had infiltrated Bohemian Grove with Alex Jones. So you have Alex Jones in like, I guess this was the 90s, with this investigative journalist who's more on the left, and the two of them at the same time like went to that town in Texas where Bohemian Grove was, and like he just dressed in like he went to like Brooks Brothers and bought like a bunch of preppy clothes and just walked in to Bohemian Grove, and like Alex Jones like approached from the through the forest trying to find his way in, and
crawling through like sewer pipes and shit.
Yeah. And so like they both, and they were staying in the same like motel room. So the guy goes and he's like just sort of taking in the sights of Bohemian Grove as these weird rich people do this insane ritual that they seem to actually believe in and think it's like a real thing. Meanwhile, Alex Jones sneaks in, and as they get back, Alex was already embellishing and saying he'd overheard these conversations that clearly had not happened. And the actual...
He was listening from far away in the woods. So for him, it's like he's just imagining what's going on.
Exactly. So, like, the real story with Bohemian Grove is these people are fucking ridiculous. And like and they have a ton of power, and that's really dangerous. And like similarly, like with the Bilderberg group, again, these people are idiots. They're super wealthy, and they are trying to kind of run the world, but like not in the way that the right-wing conspiracy theories make them out to be. Again, it's not...
I always say I wish the world was centrally planned by one committee. It would be a lot better run.
Right.
Easy.
It looks to
Just
me
go
entirely
get those
like
guys.
a bunch of greedy fucks trying to get 5% richer every year. That's about how it looks. Gents, that was a chaotic spin of the roulette wheel of discourse. Thank you so much. Do you have any closing thoughts after all of that? My head is spinning, but I loved it.
I guess I'll go since nobody else is. So first off, Patrick, I really want to thank you. This was a really great dialogue. I loved especially that we had some sparks flying at the beginning. I think overall this has been a very encouraging conversation for me, because you are seeing the same things that I am seeing, and that is something that has not been happening like within the country, within political discourse, and that's very, very encouraging. I guess I will say, just sort of as a closing, I think that as we move forward into the 20 for into the next 80 years of this century, there's some very, very important decisions that are going to have to be made by society, and we need to find a way to either repair or overcome our institutions. But before we can do that, we have to take basic empathy. We have to be able to use compassion and to talk with those who disagree with us in a way where we are actually seeing things from their perspective, because if we cannot, we will not be able to marshal the kind of solidarity that we need. And that means that people on the right and the left, and especially the left, need to be okay with difference. That is really, really key.
That's right.
The people in power want us divided, right? There's nothing better for them than us to bicker and argue.
Nothing better.
Exactly. And nothing more dangerous.
Win.
You were talking earlier about, unionization. I think unionization is one of the most important things in the United States. It functions as a great check on power. So, like, yeah, I think this has been phenomenal. I'll just say, if people are looking to see me and what I'm doing, you can look me up on Kickstarter. I'm about to launch a new graphic novel for Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, and Darude Shadow of the People is going to continue to grow. You can also find me on YouTube. Just Google my name, Brenton Lengel. My website is www.brentonlengel.com. And my podcast is bigger than Chapo Trap House. Officially, that is definitely the case, and I am totally not lying to anyone about that. Just check me out.
Thank you, Brent.
Yep. All right, I'll go second. Brenton, I enjoyed it. Chris, I enjoyed it. Paul, I enjoyed it. As you can see, I can rev up like that. I am very passionate about issues, but I'm always open to understanding other people's side. I'm the first to go out and let people know that look like me. Hey, there are white people struggling too. Get over what you're on, because we have something bigger going on. My closing remarks are, one thing that scares me, and it kind of sends chills as I'm talking about it, is we are in a serious crisis in this country. I don't think it's a constitutional crisis. I think it's a moral crisis. I think when you tell the truth and then backlash happens on the truth and then you retreat from it, something that we know is true, then we're at a really, really, really deep end. And so I'm saying that because I saw Ted Cruz go on Tucker Carlson the other day after he called the people who attacked the police terrorists, and he went and walked it back. Now, I expect that from him because he's just a wimp. He just is. He's the biggest wimp I've ever seen. He is but he's a smart guy. He's an intelligent guy, constitutional wise.
Just sway in the wind and say whatever they think they need to.
Just sway in the wind. But Lindsey Graham, same thing. Last year, Trump, January 6th, Trump, count me out. I'm out. This year, January 6th. January 6th is not the most important date. It's Afghanistan pullout by Biden. Kevin McCarthy. All these different guys. Mitch McConnell. The president is responsible for January 6th. But we don't need a committee to look over it. A commemoration on the House floor. 2 conservatives were there, Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney. He was more so there as support for his daughter than the other piece. That scares me because we're really at a point where our norms are under assault and there is no truth, and we don't have a 2-party system. The Republican Party is morphed into anarchy. And
I object to how you're characterizing that. Anarchy is much better than the Republican Party, but I get you.
You think? Okay, so look, give me a word for it, and I take it so I can start using it, because I don't.
I mean, to tell you the truth, I honestly think that the Republican Party has embraced fascism, and I know that that's like a loaded term.
Yes.
It probably is not going to play well with a lot of people because they've overused it.
Just say a little bit fashy.
Yeah.
Fashy vibe.
Well, here's the thing. So when capitalism fails the ruling class, this is very important. It's always very important to study history. When capitalism fails the ruling class, when the wealthy lose faith in capitalism's ability to maintain their privileges, they have recourse to fascism to maintain it, and they always do it.
That's right.
And that's really, really scary. When our system fails, and it inevitably will, because nothing lasts forever, you usually have 2 choices on what you're going to base the new society on. If it is class, you get socialism. And if it is race or nationality, you get fascism. And I know which one I prefer at this point, because both combatants know what's in stake for the loser. So I will just say that the Republican Party, in my opinion, has at this point, a large portion of them have abandoned liberalism, and in the sense of political classical liberalism, not liberal on the left. So they've abandoned liberalism and they have embraced fascism, and that is incredibly dangerous, because even if the Republican Party comes back, and even if the sort of Trumpist elements are removed, we are going to be rooting these people out of our government and military for years, and that's incredibly dangerous.
Yes. and they're embedded in it deeply. And I'll say this lastly. Mike Pence on January 6th last year, no matter what anybody wants to say about him as a loyalist to Donald Trump, is a hero and a person that it deserves credit for at least extending the life of democracy. Because based on the pressure he was under, he could have got up there and went rogue, and he didn't. And I will say that, and I have to go out and tell people this over and over, where they always mention that Mike Pence was this or that, and I tell them stop. Because if Mike Pence was not there that day, someone who has respect for norms and the Constitution, if Matt Gaetz was up there, if Ted Cruz was up there, if Jim Jordan was up there, if Kevin McCarthy was up there, maybe even Mitch McConnell was up there, we may be having a different conversation.
That's very much the case.
And so, absolutely. And so, I don't know what his political career will be. I will say he committed political suicide, but I'll just say that I revere him as a savior. And I hope that history rewards him for his efforts and overlook some of the kowtowing and loyalty that he had towards Trump, because maybe it was all worth it for him to ultimately stand up and say, I'm going to ceremonial certify this election. I'm going to do what the Constitution gives me the authority to do. And so hopefully we don't have that conversation that the democracy falters. At some point it will. I really believe that. Nothing lasts forever. But I think democracy still is pretty young.
Not to drag this out. Not to drag this out, but there is
deny
something that you just jogged a thought, and I wanted to present this to everybody. And Paul, if you've got an opinion on this, please weigh in, because I know I've probably talked over you a bit. Here's the deal. Historically, the United States, when a country moves in a socialist direction, even if it's not a serious one, like with Allende in Chile, historically, the United States has done what's called the Jakarta method, where they will assassinate or put the leader in a position to be assassinated, or in the case of Chile, Allende he committed suicide, and the fascist general Pinochet took over the country for years, and they're only just now undoing a lot of the damage that he did. So let's go back and let's assume that Mayo Pete did not take, when Obama called him, he did not, he said, no, I think I can still win. And Bernie Sanders went on to get the nomination. Do you guys think if Bernie had been the one coming in instead of Biden, do you think it might have been possible that certain forces like Pence, but other ones, would have gone the other way and
that is highly probable.
Chosen a dictatorship over Bernie?
Well, because I think there
higher.
is Bernie derangement syndrome, just like there is Trump derangement syndrome, where a lot of people think that literally everything Trump did was fascist. And it's like, oh, he's pretty fashy for sure, but not everything was an act of fascism.
Right.
And with Bernie Sanders, the Red Scare fear of communism, which is just like completely absurd. Like, one thing America's never going to be is communist. Like, that's just, I never see that happening. America would have to completely dissolve and something else comes out. But like Bernie Sanders being president is not going to magically make us communist. But
communism, I should say, by the way, you're talking about like the USSR system. Actual communism, as defined, is a stateless, classless, moneyless society where the economy is run on by the workers for the benefit of the entire society. So America itself would have to dissolve because they're stateless.
Yeah, you got to overthrow the donor class.
Okay.
I mean, you got to overthrow all the special interests
the definition of like
to get
USSR authoritarianism. Kind of like
exactly. Marx-Leninism, essentially. Yeah, there would never be a Marx-Leninist United States, or if there was, we would name it something different and pretend like we invented it.
And there would have to be some sort of flag or cross a little bit more. See, as you can tell, I don't read the books. This is my problem. But I think the fear of that, and even Biden being constantly labeled a communist whenever I flip to Fox News, I'm like, is completely absurd. It doesn't make any sense. Biden is nowhere close to that.
Yes.
But that's just the state of things that we're in now, where everything is completely hyperbole and nothing is real and nothing is true, and it's all just things that happen on the screen that we watch. So, but my parting words, really enjoyed it. Brenton, I'm gonna have to check out your graphic novel because I think maybe if you put a little theory in there, if there's pictures, that'll help me out. Chris, always love talking to you, and then honestly, a lot of respect to Patrick because I don't know a lot of people that would go and talk with three people of the opposite side. You're quite outnumbered, so honestly, that's really awesome that you jumped on.
Most
if
definitely.
you guys, I'll send Chris
most
the
definitely.
thing. If you guys do want to check out the Darude graphic novel, I'm still taking
definitely.
pre-orders for it. You'll get it within the next couple of weeks. So
Okay. On the website?
Yeah, I'll put the link. It's on the Backer Kit website. The Kickstarter is over, but people are still able to buy the comic, and I'll get it shipped out to you guys immediately, and I'll be sure to sign it for you.
Yeah, dude,
definitely.
I'll
I'll order
get on it
today.
too, for sure.
Yeah, I'll order today.
I'll put a link into the chat.
Just keep going on podcasts. You'll sell some more copies. I know you did very well ever since.
Oh my god, that was so cool.
Yeah,
Robert Evans shouted me out on Behind the Bastards. That was.
Oh, did he?
I've been a fan of his. I've been a fan of his for years.
I helped a little bit with that.
You helped a lot with that. Yeah, you got him to follow me and to send me. He sent me a message, and then we went back and forth for a while, and they were like, "Oh, you're gonna have to pay this huge amount," and he's like, "No, you won't."
Gents, this went better than I expected, although I'm not that surprised. I heard Pat on the 47th President podcast, which is pretty superb, and you were wonderful there, wonderful here. I think there's
Thank
a
you.
really important lesson that I always try and do with this podcast, that I'm just so tired of, and I think as partisan as we always were, social media trains us to get that dopamine hit off of feeling slightly smug and being like, oh, good, I'm right and everyone's wrong. Superb. And look, not everyone is as willing to have this discussion without getting their ego in the way. But I hope you share this with your peeps. And it's more important than ever because, I think Paul doesn't plug it enough, but his podcast is superb, the Southern Podcast Authority. And he did an episode on the algorithm. I'm a long-time fan, but that episode on the algorithm blew my mind. And I think that's what we're up against. It's darker than just Soros or the Koch brothers. It's just the billions of people playing on social media to get likes, and that's really sad that we do a bunch of stuff just for the economy, or worse than that actually, just because we feel like we're part of a group on the winning team.
We aren't even getting paid anymore. It's just likes. We're destroying society for likes.
Somebody, real quick, somebody asked me, I put up something in my story, and they asked me, how many views did you have? And I said, I only had 4. And they were making fun of me. And for a moment, I got upset. But then I thought about it, and I was like, I can't control who decides to scroll my shit. And the fact that you're making fun of me just tells me something about you. And so, but I was caught into it for a moment, and those likes will get you there. Likes and unlikes and unfollows and unfriends, and I went crazy around
arguments with people.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's what I noticed, and I love it. I get stuck in it. And I was in the mountains in northern Thailand, right? I spent a quarter of my time arguing with some anti-vaxxer. And I'm like, why the fuck? Never met the person in my life.
Yeah.
Never, why do I care? But that's exactly why Facebook is a free app that's worth billions of dollars. Because that's what it does. It sucks you in. And I think that's so much darker than... It's easy the devil we know. And that's my problem with the conspiracy theories. The power behind, it'd be so much easier if it was 4 Jewish dudes. That we could handle. Fortunately...
PBS Frontline did a documentary called United States of Conspiracy. If you're a PBS fan, I like Frontline documentaries. Check it out. It walks you through Alex Jones from his Alex Jones is from here in Dallas. Walks you through his upbringing in Austin. Man, he's good at what he does, but he's dangerous. But he's sincere too.
That's the most.
How can you be all three?
When he believes it. When
he's sincere, good.
That's the concern.
He believes that shit, dude. Yeah, he didn't start off that way though, and that documentary will walk you through it. But it's easy to, and I'll let you guys go. It's easy to get sucked into that when you keep stroking it. Same thing with Rush. Last article I read about Rush was in Vox magazine. He was getting chemo for cancer, and they were saying that his dream was to get Trump reelected. And they were talking about Rush's early days, and he didn't believe that stuff as much. But the more he stroked it, the more love he received, the more he believed it. It's about love. It really is.
It almost reminds me. There's a great Kurt Vonnegut book called Mother Night, it follows the career of a fictionalized playwright who is hired by the U.S. State Department to pretend to be a Nazi propagandist, and like during like the actual like rise of Hitler. And one of the big lessons of the book is like, be careful what you pretend to be, because you may wake up one day and realize that's exactly what you are. And I think that's directly comparable when you when you saw 4chan, turn from a random geek site into like an incubator for white supremacists.
Yeah, for people LARPing racist jokes to, they're not LARPing so much these days.
Wait, what is the site again? What is it called?
Yeah, 4chan.
Oh.
Like Ars. Ars.
Oh, yeah,
or
it's
like
the birthplace of QAnon, right?
Mm-hmm. It started on 4chan, then went to the more extreme 8chan. Now it's on 8kun, because 8chan got taken down because they kept, inspiring mass shootings. But like
that was
a
just
lot
the
of these
same
people,
site with a different name, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Run by the same freaky,
same
weird person.
Some American weirdo living in the Philippines, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And if you listen to QAnon Anonymous, they go into it, and they've actually had, it was between him, and between him and the guy who actually created the 4chan, or not 4chan, but what's the one? 8chan. The guy who created 8chan was in the Philippines working with this weirdo who got rich off of porn sites, and at one point he sort of distanced himself from the thing because they kept causing mass shootings and all this stuff, and it led to him as a disabled individual having to flee the country in the dead of night because this dude managed to make the authorities in that country go after him. They were going to put him in jail, and it would have killed him. So there's some really intense stuff going on with regard to that.
Well, and then now one of those founders, Ron Watkins, is running for Congress in Arizona, so we'll see how that goes.
Oh, that's horrifying. Yeah, Ron Watkins is the crazy rich guy that I was talking about.
Yeah,
gentlemen, it was wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's do it again sometime when we've had time to enjoy this. I will edit it over the next couple of weeks and put it up on all the socials with all the links we mentioned. Gents, you're wonderful. Thank you so much from Bangkok.
Thanks,
Chris.
Same here, gentlemen.
This has been my favorite podcast with you, Chris. You always have a good one, but this has been my favorite.
Really appreciate it.
I'm going to have a new graphic novel to read. I'm really excited.
That's amazing.
Well, it's just a comic at this point. It will be a graphic novel.
Comic, all right.
If everyone sends me their